Okay, I'm going to move forward to Patrick for our foundation report. Thank you, Patrick.
So really excited to be able to bring G4 back. The last time we did this was December 2019, when G4 came down and presented at that point phase 0, which just was the precursor to us really getting started on a 4+ year project. Supporting the library and making sure that the library has a really robust and thorough new library master plan. This is part of our engagement, which was a heavy priority of this year. We met with all 36 branches, many friends and patrons and library staff came out and really informed the plan itself, and so you'll hear a little bit more about that. But right now I'd like to introduce David Schnee and Jill Ayers, who have been working with the executive team, Misty's team, myself, some trustees, to ensure that what we are presenting to the city moving forward is really amazing. Jill.
Thank you, Patrick. Library Commissioners, Misty and team. It's wonderful to be here again. Patrick mentioned December 2019. My first day on this project was actually 4 years ago last week. I landed in San Diego for the first time, sat down with Misty and the team, sat down with the foundation, and started what Patrick lovingly called phase 0, which was we know we need a plan. We are not sure what the planning process is going to look like. And so we spent 6 months going through, kind of taking a look at the lay of the land, where you are, where you wanted to go in terms of your plan, and put together a process. And that process began in earnest in early 2020.
What happened?
And it went just as we expected. So we are here today. Let's see if I can. I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of the process behind us. It's been 4 years, and I know some of you have been with us all the way through, but there's a few new faces in the audience, and we want to make sure that everyone has a chance to understand what we've been doing and why. We're going to share some of our findings, both from the engagement sessions and then our look through all of your facilities, which we've been doing over the last year. Some of the draft recommendations that we have. We'll have an opportunity for the commission to ask some questions if you have any, but please, if you need any clarification along the way, don't hesitate to ask. And then we will talk about next steps. So, as I mentioned, the phase 1, we started in January 2020. What we didn't get to do during phase 1 was come down and look at any of the facilities we hadn't visited when we were here 4 years ago, June 2019. At that time, we saw Central Library, this building, and we saw Oak Park Ridge. And as it turned out, those two libraries actually gave us a really good sense of, the entire spectrum of your libraries, where this building, clear vision of the future of library services, and Oak Park, ready for what's next. That we, I believe, finished up in early 2022. We did a whole bunch of engagement during that process. We talked with thousands of people, even though it was virtually. We did have really robust engagement, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. And then starting last summer in earnest, I think again in June. I was here June of last year, and we kicked off this phase 2. Who is not here today. He was here yesterday, the last 2 days, but couldn't be here with us today, is Carson Block. Some of you know he's been a very strong partner with Group 4 throughout this process, and he sends his regards and his regrets that he could not be here. What we are here to do today, as I mentioned, is kind of share what we've been hearing, share what we've seen, share where we think you may want to consider going, and give you that first look at it. Our next steps ahead of us broadly are to share this around a little bit more with some other stakeholders in the city and the community, and then start writing it up. And this will be our chance to ask us any questions, tell us what feels right, what doesn't feel right, what you're excited about for San Diego, and what we need to make sure we get into the plan to make this as useful as possible. By our count, rough math, we've, over the last 4 years, had maybe 11,000 people involved in this process. That phase 1 process, we had a community survey where I think more than 8,000 people responded, but that wasn't all. We engaged staff as well in that process. We had also University of San Diego's Nonprofit Institute helped us with some focus groups of underrepresented and marginalized populations that we knew would have more difficulty participating through a community-wide survey. So they did those 15 focus groups, some in Spanish, some in English, families, military folks, people with disabilities. We had some temporarily unhoused. We tried to get sort of a diversity of voices so that we could make sure that as we were thinking about San Diego now and into the future, we were getting more people around the table than the people who just happened to be able to easily do a community survey. So what have we heard? Thinking back to what came out of phase one, that master plan framework, not for individual branches, but for overall for the city, for the library system, and for the future, we came up with this statement of vision for the library, which was 4 big themes. The first one is that equitable. The library should be serving everyone and giving people what they need and what they want in order to succeed in life. It's not going to be the same for everybody. Everyone should have services that match their needs and interests and priorities where they are in the community. Everywhere, the idea that library services aren't just in the buildings, but they're out in the community in programs and services and available online through the internet. Everyone should have access to something in the library all the time and anywhere. Effective, the library is effective, and this is really making sure that the library has the resources and the support and the staff have what they need in order to provide those good services to the community, to have the kind of impacts that the library wants to have to help San Diego move forward into the future. And then experiential, the word wow came up a lot. We just want everybody who walks into your library, who goes to the website, to just think like, wow, positive wow. So this became how we looked at your facilities and what we did in the last year. I won't read these out loud for you, but these were some of the statements that were big in our phase one framework report. The things that we want to make sure that all libraries do are what they're like, what they provide. This last bullet point I did want to call out, is this is one of the things that we said all of San Diego Public Library's facilities should have places for people to gather and have meetings and participate in programs. And that's one of the things that's very ED assisted. This building has a number of spaces like this, but not all the branches do. Poor Oak Park did not. We had to meet, I think, in the staff. There are more spaces needed to provide the kinds of services that San Diego communities want and need. There's a lot of books in your library, and the plan does not say you should get rid of any of those, but it does say more spaces needed around those books for those people program, experiential collaboration activities and services that people want. And then the idea of making sure that there's space available equitably throughout the city. Not just more space in the newer areas of the city that are growing, but making sure that all of your communities have access to quality library space. And then this is back to that idea that the library needs resources and support in order to have those positive impacts, and then the community must continue to be engaged in all library improvement projects. So that's what we've been striving to do as well. So this is where I hand it over to David to talk about what that looks like.
Great. Thanks, Jill. Excellent intro and summary, and it's a real privilege to be before you today. Jill and Carson really led and were the front of our whole team during the phase 0 and 1 efforts, and then I was watching from adjacent desk as Jill and Carson were having this great time and setting up this great vision. Pandemic's over, now we can go and visit all the facilities and we can start engaging the public live. So some of the best practices are to make sure we're going to go door to door. We're going to go in every single branch library, and you have a lot of libraries. 35, and here at Central you have to meet multiple times for it, and there's always things that require different scheduling. And I want to give a shout out to Jennifer Jenkins, if you could stand up. And to Misty and Patrick, who basically gave up so many evenings over a long time, and we created this sort of band tour shirt. That, which their sizes are are coming, but what you love, change and add for it, and I think this creates a great foundation. And we made it just super easy for people to engage in long, really meaningful conversations, and also really quick. And those quick discussions were ways to prompt more in-depth discussion. So we're going to share what we heard and just get the feel of the groups that came out. And you think in groups of a dozen, 20, 50, and sometimes the smaller groups are where you really get those richer conversations. So it really balances out the whole big picture of all the other engagement techniques. But so we asked everyone, of course, to start with what do you love about the library? And there is so much to love, and this is a hugely beloved organization that you have. And system-wide, these 6 bullets I will read because it's worth reinforcing as the foundation. That, of course, the staff, like unlike other ways that you can get resources and information, having people who are there to help you without a commercial interest or bias makes all the difference. Library staff are here to help people succeed in their personal journeys, their family, their community goals. People still love books, and the collections are diverse, so it's not just hardcover books, but it's all types of books and all sorts of languages. But what a lot of people don't think about is combined staff and the libraries here, it's about programs. Hundreds of programs are delivered each year, and people have grown to love them, appreciate them, need them as the techniques of getting together with staff and their fellow community members to advance. It's convenient, people want it to be convenient and accessible. And most of all, there's a sense of this is my library. I'm not going to some third-party institution. This is my library. I own it. I pay for it through my taxes if I'm a taxpayer, or paid for it in the past. And I really have a sense of belonging and a chance to interact with my neighbors. And back to what Jill said, there's a sense of neat stuff's happening here. There's, wow, what can we see here? So you're a fantastic library. People have said they really love that, and the folks are there. So we have a spreadsheet with thousands of entries of this data, and one of the ways to help share it is to just do these little word clouds, and we put them into these little shapes. And so we have it system-wide is what we talked about, the whole city-wide, but then we look at it by planning zones, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But we look at it to see where there are differences. And so our south branches, really loving staff universally. But when we talk about books, we'll also find out in the sort of eastern suburban area and the south area, particularly finding books that are translated into Spanish and other resources. So that's something that comes out. So based on that foundation of what people love, what do you want to change here? And it's really open-ended. The next question about what you'll add sort of overlaps with that. It doesn't really matter which category, but we could add these 2 things in to see how does it guide what our recommendations for the branch improvements can be. So system-wide, people say, hey, it's good, but we want to keep on enhancing the library environment. We want to increase space, so it's reinforced what Jill said we got out of the framework. Children's areas, program spaces, just the basic infrastructure. There are some things that are falling apart and need to be addressed. And seeing the place as convenient, not just with other residents and staff, but bringing community partners who are so often providing programs. And so our north branches, sometimes you just have to access is such a big theme. Parking is really important. So that drives like the Scripps Miramar parking lot expansion. Like, so you say, well, we have to be building buildings. Yeah, but just making sure people can get there is very important. And also making sure there's more space for programs and places for people to gather, like we heard in our southeastern branches. And in a similar theme, what would you add if anything was possible? We don't want to restrict to just say, and some people say, hey, fix the toilet and University Heights library and other pieces, but we wanted to try to have people think big. And similarly, again, a lot of overlap. Thinking about indoor-outdoor connections, spaces is something that shows up neat here. And again, things like tool vending library. And how many of you saw the Instagram video promoting this meeting today? Oh, you didn't. A few of you saw it too. So like it was mentioned that someone suggested bees. And apparently that's trending now.
It is trending.
It's
Definitely.
trending. And so,
a lot of people want them.
and so people don't understand what's bees. And so it's not uncommon for libraries to have seed. You have seed library collections and garden spaces. And so bees is actually connecting us to our environment and how do we promote sustainable culture, and cities actually do a really good job of that through diverse flowers and pollinators. So as we look at how things add, it's worth talking about what's the first big word that pops out in here. Books. And so libraries are still foundational about books, but it's all sorts of different types of books. And we have to think that the Misty just mentioned that there was within the budget a little jolt in the collections. You can always be doing more. When we think about collections impact into the facilities over time, every year new things are being published. You want to still have access to the old things. Collections take up a lot of space. But the themes that Jill was talking about in the foundation were about people too. So it's not an either or. You don't want to fight, well, let's take out collections to make room for people. How do you expand to make sure you have the right collections for people, a lot of demand for that, and space for people. So that's the big driver of it. So that's the foundation. We'll want you to think about later on if you're hearing different things and all. When we get to, after this session, we're going to be jumping straight into trying to draft the plan. We have this love change at a branch level as well. And we're also mining it to see where people may be concerned about change too. And so that we can try to be proactive about that too. So this next section, we're going to talk about the emerging recommendations. Very broad brush. There should be a draft watermark on everything. For those of you who are watching on Instagram Live and those of you who have handouts and things, please don't publish this yet, because this is very draft. When we get the draft report out, we will be putting that online, and it will be available for a comment in a whole variety of ways. This is very preliminary. We're concluding our outreach and sort of showing what we're hearing from it. We need the commission and our foundation and friends to help guide us in our drafting so we can be as good as we can in our first draft. So if you haven't seen this image before, it shows all of your current facilities in visual proportion to their size. So of course, half of your square footage is in the lovely central library where we're presenting from today. And you have some larger branches, and they get to smaller and smaller. You have some tiny branches too. And as Jill had pointed out, one of the themes is there's equity and equality are two different measures. We don't want to try to make everybody the same. A big library system works in that we also found out that people use lots of different libraries, and we'll be introducing a theme about that too. So planning, this isn't the first time you guys are planning. Back in 2002, there was released the library's building plan, and from that, through a lot of successful grant funding from the state, the 2000 library statewide bond that was available, and I think San Diego, beat all other jurisdictions in the state for getting the most grant funding, which included a $20 million grant for this building, the central library, and many others, plus the city's capital improvement plan funding and other foundation, a huge contributor for it. Giant foundation support for this, so that was able to do basically just shy of a third, make major physical improvements to a third of the facilities. Fantastic. It's a generational piece, like the Golden Gate Bridge. You paint all of it, and when you're done, you paint it all again. You build this, there's no rest for the weary. You just got to keep on going, and that's what this effort is now. So the library has not paused. It's not waiting for this plan based on current needs and understanding. A number of projects are underway. There's the Scripps Miramar. The expansion is for the parking lot. And so there's 5 projects underway. We've just gotten the Oak Park. And was the architect selected for that yet?
Not for Oak Park yet.
Not yet. But so the selection process is underway. So it's very exciting that the next replacement library. So 35 existing locations here, branch locations, and we've, I don't have that slide that shows we did customer mapping, which was to actually see where people who use each library live. And so what are the travel patterns? And a lot of people think, you close your eyes, the library is just about books. You close your eyes and say, what's my neighborhood library? How great is it or not? But people are mobile across this whole city and beyond, and people travel to the libraries as closer to work, or closer to family members, or closer to entertainment, or recreation, or something, there's a great program going there. And that library card gets us in all libraries. So there's a zone concept, and we just call them all letters. There's no F here, because nobody wanted to be attributed to F here. And there's no valuation, and this service isn't being delivered here. It's just a planning tool to let us not over-plan at too small a level. Because if you're able to make an improvement here, but then the site is too constrained and you can't do it, maybe an adjacent library can meet some of that need. So that's part of the framework. The city, the library is a city department. The city had conducted before our time, and we had access to what's called a facility condition assessment, an FCA, and they do an index rating of each building. It's sort of like when you go to the doctor and they tell you where you are, and I need more exercise, and I could lose a few pounds. You get statistics here for it, and it's just worth knowing that your facilities as of this year, our median age is 37 years old, and but more importantly, the most sustainable building is one that you keep on reusing and keep on going for generations. The age alone isn't so critical, but the FCI, the condition index of being in the more than half of your facilities are already at the fair or poor. What does this mean? It means you are getting a capital maintenance backlog for it. Your facilities to keep on delivering service need significant investments, and anyone who is operating libraries or you as the commissioners know that. So we're going to look at, just like there were principles about service delivery, there are principles to consider as we talk about how to guide the next round of facility improvements. So one of them is that more central to all of our lives and thinking ahead, we're all experiencing the realities of climate change and threats of different types and costs of energy. The city has a climate action plan, our climate, our future. The library is actually bringing this home in programs to community members in branches day in, day out. We're finding this is a global trend of interest. And so making sure that we're, the facility recommendations, we're budgeting and recommending that each of the libraries be as sustainable as possible, generating electricity, decarbonizing the way that energy is brought into the building, zero waste and other aspects. Another aspect is about inclusive design. In front of like Andrew Carnegie's libraries around the nation, above the door it says open to all, but who is all here? And here's the famous diagram about if you provide everything the same, it doesn't really fit almost the majority of people. And you have to sort of tailor services to everyone. And that includes recognizing different ages and sizes. People still need quiet and active spaces, different languages, different abilities, recognizing lifestyle changes and spiritual aspects of what people come to the library for, providing all these different types of space. As Carson's always said, technology is fundamental. Like we probably close our eyes and think books and technology. Having Carson was the first one to tell me that there should be an outlet at every chair. People needing to charge is so critical, and whether it's through e-books, technology at the library, and it's always evolving, and the library is evolving services with it, but it's a cornerstone of the library service. So back to another one of the key principles of the framework plan was places to gather and convene. They should be, one of the recommendations was there's a large capacity meeting room in each of the zones. It'd be nice to have them everywhere, but we have, that would be practical. And so our biggest green circles show where they are, and there's a number of zones that don't have those, and so we want to look for those opportunities going forward. And group study rooms and places to bring partners in. You could probably not build enough of these, build too many of these here. So as we talk about, again, the wow and the experience, so you guys are constantly building, and one can be, what is it, just for those who are watching or haven't been in a newer library, just quick teasers of what So new construction is near the newest branch library open, San Isidro, bold colors and civic spaces, flexible furniture. We also showing teen spaces, group study rooms, wonderful spaces there. Followed just a few years prior to Mission Hills, Hillcrest Knox Library, which just shows the wow when you come in and the spaciousness, a fair amount of flexibility, wonderful children's spaces that you can have. So the experiences, and we'll share a few more thoughts in a second about that sort of takes us up to today, and we as National Library architects and digital planners are trying to keep our fingers on the pulse of what's coming next so that you can continue to lead. But as you build new facilities, you're not, the library is a standalone institution, but in a broad governmental framework. And so like City Heights Library, doing projects joint use is now standard fare and looking for opportunities because your customers aren't wanting recreation and wanting health, other services. The more you can co-locate them and combine them, it's great. We know there's a bit of a housing issue here in San Diego, and libraries, that need and the need for expanded library space can overlap. Here is some work we've been doing in Santa Cruz for probably shy of a decade now, where a project that's finally sort of moving ahead, where they need to rebuild their downtown library, and it's being combined with a large parking structure and senior housing so that the library can be there. Combined as part of the same development. So that type of opportunity, keep your eyes out for and looking how the library can do it. The picture is really small here too, but and you don't have that many ones, but you rather than think of everything as new construction, as I said, the most sustainable building is a reuse building. In Olathe, Kansas, we had the opportunity of doing the planning and then being on the design team for converting an old supermarket, 46,000 square foot supermarket, into just a stunning award-winning library that has your idea lab, the maker spaces that are evolving as gems and jewels right up front. Also in Spokane, Washington, the next level of children's spaces is learning through full body play, through fantasy play, through constructive play, really finding ways of doing some wonderful magical work. This is starting to spread like wildfire through California and across the nation. And then, again, just places to gather that are flexible. You can have a program here, you can sit by a fire, for us probably be a hologram when over gas. Okay, so then getting into the meat of the plan, and I'll try to keep this moving quickly. So in the end, our deliverables as part of this plan will be a series of recommendations of what are the best opportunities for each branch location here, and where in general we think there's a need for additional. And they fit into these sort of 5 categories. We're going to show each branch in what our present draft thinking is for its, what we think is the highest and best need in 2040 to date, but there may be other ones as well, and you may want to say, oh, this only says a renovation, but I'd like to, let's also consider for new construction. It doesn't eliminate that, that isn't an option. The nature of the zone planning is that we can always sort of adjust our planning for it. But makeovers, just like the HGTV series, like how do you work within and just make it deliver more for a really effective renovations and expansion, new construction and relocation, but throughout capital maintenance. And where appropriate, in addition, we're complementing those strategic investments. We'll talk about all of those. So right above Jill is a poster here that says, for the main delivering equitable services, we're trying to see where is the space deficit that we have here. We're saying we need to provide more space. How do we do that? The appropriate custom tailored benchmark for this city is 0.6 square foot per capita. That includes incorporating this space of the central library's space into the whole, across the whole city. We're looking at, there are different projections for 2040 population. There's a lower and a higher. Rather than being behind when you're done, we're going to have a slightly higher number for, I think it's about 200+ thousand more people expected. Sorry, but I might have quoted that wrong. And that is translating with the numbers that we're using pretty accurately between 138 and 165,000 square feet of additional space. So that alone could be a whole number of new libraries, but for being able to be effective and deliver within your services, we have pretty good geographic coverage here. So it's how can we expand some of our libraries for the most part, rather than creating lots of net new smaller libraries. So that's what drives a lot of this. So I'm not going to go through all of these in detail, but we've identified quite a number of locations for Pacific Highlands Ranches in progress. Here, Oak Park is in design selection process here. We're replacing on a new site, moving from its current landlocked to Oak Park. And other ones that are existing sites or new sites, and new sites become the biggest challenge. If you have them, if you can find them, you sort of jump on those opportunities as well. So these are the opportunities to have the real state-of-the-art full-service libraries, built as big as you can. And so just as an example, like University Heights was on there, and it's a beloved building in lots of different ways, but it is so small and impacted. It's a great resource for the friends, it's a great resource for the community, but it is way too impacted. Well, the toilet falling off the wall a week ago or so, and it's completely landed. So we say, well, how can you create a new one here? Perhaps that picture, as I showed before, like in Santa Cruz, you find an opportunity to build a big, proper-sized library with great transportation and parking. Those are the types of things. We have a list of renovation projects. So we've got a number of locations shown here. And this is from having looked at each site individually. The examples, what do you mean by renovation? The Otay Mesa Nestor branch was back in 2006 expanded. Where possible, we can do that. I wouldn't, there's need for more square footage in the south, whether it's a net new library in that zone. It's one of the recommendations where we even said, do you fill in the outdoor patio with a sunlit place where you hop across the street to the, join the park to the north. So renovations and expansions, some are just renovations of infrastructure, some are expansions. So we've done these types of sort of little diagrams to say like Carmel Mountain Ranch could potentially take advantage of some of the outdoor space while still leaving other key outdoor spaces or expand similar to Otay Ranch, the meeting room there. And we love makeovers. How many of us did our makeovers in parts of our houses during the pandemic? You can make a big difference with selected ones, so this is very important opportunities. And then capital maintenance. So the reason we put this here too and identify some locations that seem like they could use more for capital maintenance is we also are trying to say, if you've got a library that's going to move, let's say, and again, just University Heights is just one that always comes to mind, you could put a ton of maintenance dollars into that. And would it make sense to put millions of maintenance dollars into that now when you really need to relocate and build new? And so we may say in the short run, make good, and there have been strategic, there are certain key maintenance, you got to put the toilet back up, otherwise it's shut. So you want to be strategic on these and working with city facilities folks for keeping those going. And so here are the locations that all are identified as definitely good candidates for capital maintenance needs. And then strategic investments. So we want in this plan everyone to feel that they're going to see something through this. Nobody gets left out, even if they had a new, relatively new library investments from the 2002 master plan. Well, by 2040, that's some years on, so everyone should get something there. So we've identified those locations for it. And we'll have 2-page spreads on each location showing what are the specific recommendations. And the gem in the crown, the central library too. How many people feel this building's new? Oh, some of you do. I still feel it's new. I remember its whole story. For those of us who are, got the gray hairs, the time goes by fast. But 20 years already, and to 2040, we're talking about 10 years. 10 years. Okay, sorry.
It
10
just
years.
feels like something.
Okay, sorry. 10 years. But when, as part of that same capital, the facility condition assessment, they're looking into say by 2032, there could be just some capital maintenance needs because buildings need to be renewed. Could be in the tens of millions of dollars of work here. So we need to be thinking about how we don't just aren't just competing like whatever is capital dollars available, but we're using this plan to plan fiscally ahead for how to raise that funds. And so we're almost on the home stretch here. So we know that it hasn't kept up. It's been doing good. I want to praise everybody who's contributed, the foundation, all the supporters, the city leadership, the commission, friends for making you guys have not. Some systems we go in have literally done nothing for decades. Like you guys are always doing good work. Again, to bridge analogy, you have to keep on doing it and looking broadly at funding from all sources. And to say that as part of our work, we'll be looking at CIP, the capital improvement plan of the city for the general funds that come to it. There's a sort of a scorecard of it that says like if toilet falls off the wall, I will try not to say that, talk about that one more but that's like a risk to health or safety. There's an asset condition at FCI, but there's also a service condition. We've given it an informal score that, it's functioning, but it's outdated. It's not giving what the community needs. The equity measures, sustainability, et cetera, here. So we turn it back to you, Wendy, and your team to start the discussion. And I just want to open up to those in the audience and anyone else who is watching this on Instagram live. And I want to say that Nicole Gaselli, one of our architects and planners, is watching this live, and we have Vicki White, one of our also senior planners who happens to be a San Diego resident and a customer of your libraries, is here. But you can go to menti.com and enter in the code 3863-5064, and there's just a share comments for it. So that can be another way if you don't feel like speaking out in public, but turn it back to you.
Great, thank you. Well, what a wonderful presentation. Thank you. Many of us remember being here in 2019, and then we had that little thing called the pandemic. But amazing to have it all kind of culled down into the things we thought we've always known, and then the things we didn't know, and the things we were going, that's right, yes. So, and thank you to many of you who, through this whole process, have been part of the engagement and the community listening and the Patrick and Misty show tour across San Diego. But what comments or questions do you have? I mean, we're pretty far along in the plan, but today is another part of that kind of final listening engagement session. I will entertain any questions from the floor, comments. I thought that was magnificent, by the way. It just makes me more excited. I'm glad you clarified it hasn't been 40 years. Hasn't been 40 years?
No,
No, I was pregnant with my daughter when we were in the old building. She was 40. 10, 20, I mean, yes.
20 years since the vision for the project started.
Vision, yes. But that was a wonderful presentation. Questions, comments?
Well,
Yes.
I would just
Steve.
comment, it exceeds my expectation. It's comprehensive, it's going branch by branch as well as the overall system. I think it's great. I don't have any questions. I just want to compliment you and Jill in terms of what your team's put together.
Thank you, Steve. And from our foundation board chair, that's high praise. I know he eats, lives, and sleeps libraries. We often say that he has a bedroll here.
Yes.
So that is, again,
That's what he did.
he does. High compliment and high praise. What else? What else from our, I know we have staff and foundation and friends and commissioners. Wendy.
I loved the format of the listening tours and getting a little bit of glimpse into that process. Fantastic. I'm trying to make sense of the slide on delivering equitable services and making sense of how, and maybe this isn't the slide that can do it, but maybe you could answer it, how population density of the areas plays into where we put new libraries, and I'm trying to make sense of that slide.
Yeah, and so thanks for the question. And definitely, there's a lot under the hood in my speed presentation, didn't necessarily do it. And sorry, if you don't mind turning, I can sort of present it here. So first let's start at the top, and it's this square foot per capita. And so what we're trying to do is say that as a measure of equity, everyone deserves access to the full range of services. And rather than drawing a population around any specific library there, which may be too small or not, if we look at a whole area, and Jill, do you want to say just a little bit about planning zones and how we design them for people's use patterns?
Yeah. I think where you were going, David, was traditionally, for a long time, the idea of providing library space proportionate to the population size, that's a classic planning principle for libraries, and that still remains. The tradition of drawing a circle around each branch and assuming that people only go to that branch who live there, that is something that we've evolved into this zone approach, where we use real data based on how people actually move around in San Diego and how the cross-use we saw at different branches, to see if there were opportunities to think about branches in partnership with each other. So that's, we've got the three sort of like Claremonts that we know people kind of share around, and each one of those is important to, maybe more important to some people than others, but still they work together as buddy branches. And so where are the opportunities to, rather than expand all of the branches because we need more space, can we selectively, strategically look at where that space makes sense? So to your question about where population density is, we have projected the population of each of those zones differently based on what we know or what the city anticipates is going to happen in each of those areas. Where a branch is recommended that it may want to be replaced in the future, we won't know necessarily when this plan is going to be published where that'll be, but it'll be, we strongly suggest putting it in a place where there is population density, where it's close to transit, where it's close to other amenities and services, so the community can travel once and get that economy of transit. Am I answering your question?
Yes.
Okay. Because
Yes.
I
keep
could
on
talk
going
about
with
this
it.
for
Yeah.
3 hours.
As I said, lifting up the hood.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.
To follow on her question, so the 0.6 per capita, is that determined based on what we have now per capita, or is that determined like the national average of what a library should have, or how did you get to 0.6?
It's based on what you have, our understanding of this community. There is no national sort of average. This recommendation is specific for San Diego in your community based on our analysis and where we understand you're going and the amount of space that would be needed to support good, robust, diverse library service here. It is a combination of what's available in the branches and what the system-wide support that this building provides, that capacity for collection, that capacity for high event, high interest programming that this facility can support all of those things. So it's a combination of those things and then taken down to the population of each of those zones.
And for major metro cities and peers, it's in the modest comparison range. There are other ones that, if you combine the central library and the branches, that you could have significantly higher needs. So if you're wondering, are there consultants trying to gild the lily or something else, it's sort of very modest. And part of that is, as Jill said, sort of basing on, you're a high performance library now, so we don't want to watch a decline in this over time. Your population's growing, the service needs are evolving, the needs for space is increasing, so this is a modest step up in that.
Great question, Scott. Steve, and then we'll go to Linda.
I'll put my CPA hat on for a second. You're making, and I assume these recommendations are great. Will your final report include any cost estimates in terms of the implementation of these recommendations?
Absolutely. So we've discussed, so we're able to do projections of what it would cost if you could do it all today. And so then the costs will then greatly change over time. We did this similar planning in Multnomah County, that's Portland, the county Portland's in. And we identified for them over time about a $700 million need for them, and they went out to a bond in 2020 and passed the first part of it of $350 million. So just to give you a sort of rough order of magnitude of like that's what a neighboring large city, county system had. And so we're developing that, and whether we publish that in the plan or not as a leadership, it's good to know the rough order of magnitude so you can get a sense of that picture of the dollars on the scale of the books, what your need is, because it's a big thing, but we're a big city. And when you really add it up, it sounds like a lot of money, but the city, one bridge overpass would probably pay for all your libraries.
Thank you. When strategic investments were mentioned, what were the determinants for establishing what these strategic investments would be?
So I'm going to answer that in two ways. So what the strategic investments could be or should be is often, this was a planning option, a facility option we started doing when we did Cincinnati, Ohio's master plan. They had 40 branches, and they were able to only fund for them $187 million in the first decade of work, but there were needs across all of their libraries, and so they said they were going to give somewhere between $50,000 and $200,000 per location for back to the budgeting piece, and then use a bit of community and staff-based process to help figure out what would have the biggest impact on each location for them. That methodology we haven't discussed or worked out in detail yet, and probably won't be in the plan. That's sort of an implementation one. The other part of it I'd like to answer is who gets those strategic investments, and that's for ones who weren't necessarily getting the makeover or the renovation there to say, okay, this is making sure I'm sure there's something as we've gone out and listened to you that you need something, and those sometimes might be, or we're going to give you a big library, but it's going to be 10 years off. What can we give you in the meantime? Gives you a little bit of wiggle.
So that was a line of thinking with the five that were listed under 2040 vision strategic investments.
Right.
Listed there. I guess the follow-up for that is in terms of other potential investments that could be made along those lines, like for example, solar panels that would offset some of the costs, and some of the incentives that you do have in California for that would really impact the bottom line. Are those considered into some of the kind of highline thinking about some of the things that can be done in some of the facilities?
Yeah, absolutely. So for all the facilities, we'll be making the recommendations in the facility master plan that the highest policies that the city has and or potentially higher if you recommend that the public library projects go to the highest level of sustainability. Some of that includes like a new construction, it's code required now to start providing solar on projects or be solar ready. And there are different ways to do it at either the location level or look more holistically citywide, so that there's definitely with city agency partners looking at are there ways to provide solar either in parking lots or on roofs and buildings.
So are we imagining like potential LEED certifications for some of these buildings or aspiring to something like that?
Absolutely, and that's consistent with city policies.
There's a LEED silver minimum, green silver,
Right.
yeah, so.
The strategic investments, as with all the projects, back to that original principle of the community needs to be involved. It's a great opportunity to engage the community on, if we had some money for a strategic investment in this branch, what would you community want to spend it on? So we're not going to tell you what it should be.
Okay.
One community may choose solar panels. One community may choose, I think what David showed in the slide, which was some new technology, maybe in some replacement furniture. It can be a bunch of different things, but having that community have a say in what that is a big part of making this a plan where there's something for everyone.
And also drilling down the definition of community, who that represents and how they're at the table. Thank you.
Yeah, and leveraging what we've heard already too, because always when you come to a meeting and someone says, well, this is what we want, this is what the group says, yeah, but we've also heard from 500 other people or 1,000 other people, and so we need to honor all the voices we've heard.
What other questions or
Yes.
I have a question. Is there anything that stood out or surprised you about the report on San Diego compared to reports you've done for other library systems?
You got an answer?
Well, it's,
Okay. I mean, there are ways that San Diego is unique, and then there are things that San Diego has in common with so many other large urban centers in the states as far as the libraries are concerned.
and I'm gonna repeat one of the comments I made, which is I think you're a high-performing library, but with a high amount of needs. And so I think you've been doing a lot with the resources you have, and the partnership, I think, with the foundation here is amongst one of the strongest of all the libraries that we're working in with. But it's one of these things where you can making sure like where's the funding balance going to come from, and what's the right means and methods. That in the end, it usually still comes down to voters. Philanthropy is good for a lot, and you've had a tremendous amount of philanthropic support. But how to really make sure we can get, because community members tend to around the nation, like the Multnomah County, Oregon, want to come out and support the library. So if there are those opportunities in your future, that may be a way to try to really make this vision happen.
I think that funding is distinctive for San Diego in that the San Diego Public Library is asked to operate 36 facilities on not a huge budget, and they are absolutely working double, triple overtime to be that high performance library that David imagined. And you can imagine how much more they could do.
Or there'll be a good ROI, return on investment, for those dollars. You can trust that they're being used well, and this plan's recommendations are, in the big scheme of things, of your size, is just an increment. Like, it's not like a wholesale one. When we did San Jose's plan, they were tripling the amount of square footage that they had because they had not made an investment forever in practical terms. And so that was a radical change they needed to do. So the amount of change that this plan envisions isn't that much when we think of it, even though it's a lot of work because you're a big city and a lot of work.
What other questions or comments?
Yeah, yes. I just have to say a comment. I'm actually the University Heights branch manager, so unfortunately it is true and recent what you said happened, but with that being said, just really appreciate this process. I just was involved with the tech visioning session yesterday, and it really got us having some really great conversations. We really appreciate that you're involving the staff, but also the community. I know we could all speak for how much our library users really love our libraries, and just having their input and they know that their voices are being heard has been really wonderful. So thank you so much.
Any final questions? If not, I just really want to thank David and Jill and Carson, who's not here, Carson in spirit, for pulling together such an enormous project. Thank you for your analogy about painting the bridge, and Patrick's going, more paint. But that also makes me think about the incredible support from the foundation for the important work that they do, to the friends who are really our boots on the ground, to our commissioners. We're working together for this big advocacy push all the time that wasn't always done, to get our leaders and all of us working together, and really, back to our staff, our library staff, that make it happen every day. This is really, really, really exciting. I think we have, for more information, it's all here. Thank you for the projections. Thank you for summarizing, a lot of complex information from a lot of different people, but it's really, really, really exciting. So anything else? If not, I'd like to say a big round of applause for our wonderful.
Okay, so do you want to talk about next steps?
Next steps?
Do you want to talk about next steps?
Yeah, next steps.
Yeah, so we are going to meet with various city stakeholders shortly, and just to make sure we're aligning with Linda, as you were saying, a sustainable capturing the current and what might be in progress and not yet published from other city departments. And then we will endeavor to get you a draft report and then come back and meet with you with what would be the public presentation. The timing of this is all still to be confirmed, so the small text in this to be determined, because we'll also, in keeping with the library's commitment and city's commitment to transparency, is how long we want it posted before we meet with you and other comments. So we're going to work out those details shortly, but we're going to be starting drafting this right away. And so August tentatively, and then we would be going to council subcommittee to go to full council for approval.
So we'll be bringing back the final plan for you all to recommend.
Right. And similar in
Right.
format that we have an 11 document, and you'll probably distribute in electronic format.
Very much appreciate the draft report. Again, just to underscore the word draft at this point, but very, very exciting. And the commission and the audience, we look forward to the final, and